Good morning, everyone. We have about 20 people, it looks like, signed on already. So I'm gonna get started. And hopefully we'll add to the group as people sign on. Welcome to the Statewide Trails Advisory Committee meeting for the October meeting. As you guys already know, we've been doing an online meeting in October and then a spring meeting, a live meeting at the Vault Conference in the spring. It seems to be working out well. And of course, this started with COVID, so we started all of this way. I wanted to welcome everyone today. Appreciate your attendance for the STAC meeting. Today, I wanted to introduce a few people, especially who's with us today with DCR. So we have Samantha Wainsgard with us today. She is the Chief Planner for Planning Recreation Resources. My name is Kelly McClary. I'm the Director of Planning Recreation Resources. We also have with us today Frank Stovall. He's the Deputy Director of Operations. Frank, yeah, thank you. And we also have Matt Wells with us today, Director of Department of Conservation and Recreation. I appreciate everyone's attendance today. We have about an hour and a half set aside for today's meeting. I also wanted to make sure I introduce our newest planner, Taylor Jenkins, and she's going to be taking over for me right now as soon as the meeting, really the depth of the meeting gets started. Taylor's going to introduce herself, but for everyone that I've seen, I think we sent an email out introducing Taylor as well. She is taking place of Jennifer Wampler. As you guys know from the spring meeting, Jennifer retired recently. And Taylor, along with her master planning duties, is also now the facilitator for the Statewide Trails Advisory Committee. So you will see her in person in April at the Vault Conference, March or April. And of course, you're going to see her today. And I would like Taylor to introduce herself to you all, give a little background of herself before we get started into the meat of this meeting. But again, thank you all for attending today. I hope you find something interesting that we talk about today. Taylor?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Kelly, for that introduction and welcome. My name is Taylor Jenkins. I'm excited to be on board and meet all of you virtually for the first time. I know I've got some big shoes to fill, but I'm very honored and proud to be following behind Jennifer and taking over the coordination for State Trails. I'm a Richmond local, so born and raised in Richmond City. This is my home. And I studied urban and regional planning for my master's degree at VCU. And I mostly focused on transportation and geospatial related courses and studies. After school, I worked for a bit at GRTC, our local transit planning system. And I then went to the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation and was a transit planner for about 3 years there. So that's a little bit about my background. I like to hike and bike in my free time, like most of you on the call, probably. And I've also got 2 cats for any fellow pet owners here on the call. So excited to be on board. Before we got started, I did want to check in. Torsia, have you joined the call yet? Torsia from the State Trails office?
I do not see her yet, Taylor.
Okay.
She's not on the attendees list.
All right. No problem. We can proceed, and we might make a few tweaks to the agenda and maybe circle back to the State Trails office update until she's able to jump on. All right, so a few meeting logistics for today. Everyone's able to mute and unmute themselves and turn your camera on and off. So just make sure your microphones are on mute for the extent of the meeting unless you have a question. If you have any comments or questions, the best way to get them answered is to put them in the chat box. And we're going to have a couple staff members who are also monitoring the chat box throughout so that nobody gets missed. This presentation is being recorded, and so we're going to send out all of the meeting materials, some draft materials for you to look at, and also the meeting recording after this meeting. As far as our agenda today, we already had our welcome from Kelly. We're going to dive into an icebreaker right after this. We're going to move the VDOT State Trails office update to the end of the meeting and instead go through our STAC survey and discussion. We're going to specifically talk about the future of STAC questions that we had in there that asked members about the STAC structure and the composition. Then after that, we're going to talk through some draft standard operating procedures and talk about our next meeting. All right, now I'm going to launch a quick icebreaker poll for the group. All right, you should be able to see it. Can anybody give me kind of a thumbs up or thank you? I appreciate it. So the question for today is, what is your trail expertise primarily in? And we've got a few buckets up there for you to choose from. We've got trail creation, construction, maintenance, use, management, and an other category. And this is just going to help us get an idea of kind of what everybody, what their expertise is in and what you kind of bring to STAC. And I'm going to leave this open for a few more seconds just so everyone can have the chance to respond.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a message that says you do not have permission to view this poll.
Oh man, is anyone else getting that same response?
Yeah, I have the same message, and then I can see it in the chat, but then when I try and vote, it says something went wrong.
Why don't you go
Okay.
ahead and just enter your response, or can you not even see the questions? If you can't answer the poll, but you can see the questions, can you just put your answer in the chat?
Can't see the question.
Okay, so the question is, my trail expertise is primarily in, and there's trail creation, trail construction, trail maintenance, trail use, trail management, or other. So if you can't see the poll and you want to put your answer in the chat, again, trail creation, trail construction, trail maintenance, trail use, trail management, or other.
Thanks, Samantha. That's a good alternative. I do see a few results in here already. So it looks like some folks were able to access it, but everybody wasn't. So we apologize for that, but thanks for dropping your response in the chat if you weren't able to access it. All right, and with that, I do see that Torcia did jump on. So Torcia, I'm going to give you an opportunity if you want to introduce yourself to the group, and I'll advance your slides for you.
Hello, everyone. And sorry for joining in late. I was driving to Northern Virginia for the next upcoming presentation, and I was just trying to set up. So thanks for being patient with me. I'm Torcia Bhattacharya. I'm the program manager of the State Trails Office and work off of the central office in Richmond. We work very closely with DCR, with Samantha and Taylor. And currently we are in the process of the public outreach and engagement, which I want to talk a lot more about with you all. But Taylor, is this a good time to get into the details of the presentation? You have the slides up. Should I just dig right in?
Yep, you can jump right in. I will advance them for you. Thank
you. As you all know, the State Trails Office was set up in 2022. The General Assembly tasked the office with a few big things, deliverables. First is development of the state trails plan. And the second one is developing a trails resource hub, which would house all types of trails. So today, what I am going to talk about is give a brief update on what we have done so far, talk about the multi-use trails definition that we have kind of solidified with your help, with the help of STAC input, and then where we are in the process of the State Trails Plan and the ongoing and some of the upcoming ways that STAC members, also just the member of the Commonwealth, anybody residing in Virginia can take part and inform the statewide trails plan. Next slide. The web page is up and running, and in a few, I think in the next month, the look of the web page is going to change. but the address is virginiadot.org/trails. If you search that, it'll take you right up to the State Trails Office webpage. We are trying to keep it updated with information about our work that we are currently undertaking, our staff, that is currently only me, and also any kind of efforts for us to interact with the public, with how the public can get more involved in informing our work going forward. And also you'll find a rough tentative schedule of activities that we have planned from this past year to going forward to the next spring. We have our first step, as in any planning process, the first step that is required is stakeholder outreach and engagement. We have planned 3 different types of stakeholder engagement. And the first one is the just recently concluded statewide survey that we had out on public input. And a lot of you have participated. We have over 5,000 responses for that. And we have received responses from trail users, trail non-users, different types of users on trails, and we have asked questions about what prevents folks or what motivates folks in using their outdoors, using the trail systems, what they would like to see, and how do we make Virginia one of the better states in terms of multi-use trail networks, build that out. So thank you to all of you who have responded to that survey. So that's one of the big things that we have tried to do, which is relatively low lift for the in terms of time engagement. Upcoming, we have a few more things that I'm going to go into greater detail in the slides after this, but we have a forum and a focus group arranged. Now, all of these outreach and engagement that we are undertaking, we will take all of those information that we get, and that will inform our statewide trails plan, which should be in the works very soon after we are able to gather all of the public input. In the state trails plan, we hope to outline what the spinal networks are for connecting Virginia with multi-use trails. And then the third part of our deliverable is building out a clearinghouse or a resource hub, which again will be a spatial database which will have specific attributes of all types of trails that are connecting different destinations, different places within the Commonwealth. So that will take a longer time than even the statewide trails plan. So the first deliverable would be completion of the outreach, which should be done by this December 2023. Then we have the outreach, the plan that will be informed, and then eventually we'll go to move on to the resource hub. Next slide. This is a snapshot of all of the organizations that have participated in the STAC survey. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Samantha, for distributing it and encouraging folks to take part. And we have heard from all of you, next slide, regarding what the priorities are, what you see, how we can improve the state trails definition that we had shared with you, and the overall when we did a sensitivity analysis, we saw that overall the responses were very positive, and the theme that flowed along across all of the responses was ongoing collaboration opportunities, representing all types of trail users, and then involvement, a greater involvement with the State Trails Office and with DCR in this whole trails planning process that we have undertaken. And those points are important, and I'm glad that you all feel the same way as we do as the State Trails Office. Is we always need ongoing collaboration and participation from everyone. In terms of specific alignments or agreements with the components of the regional multi-use trails that we had shared, we saw that some of the characteristics that we had identified was very well aligned, right? Like trails should be for non-motorized users and all types of non-motorized users. They should be physically separated from motor vehicle traffic. Again, safety being prime and center to everything that VDOT does. We were happy to see that also aligned well with the STAC members. The same thing was almost unanimous agreement on the accessibility, making sure that trails are not too steep, not too narrow, or rough for all kinds of users and of all abilities and interests. But there was some confusion, I would say, in terms of when we talked about regional significance, how do we measure regional significance, and the qualitative nature of that. So some of you sent us your comments regarding the regional connectivity and or how do we get to what is regionally significant versus what is not, and then having a hard surface or not having a hard surface. That was also a point where a few folks said that maybe keeping the options open for what kind of surface is good for trails, because trails, as we know, are all local infrastructure, and very contextual. So again, making sure that we are not leaving a lot of trails out because of not meeting the right type of surface material. That's something you all pointed out. And there was also some concern about having sections of trails that might be, due to topography, more than 5%, so very steep, and might not pass the accessibility guidelines. There were some concerns that if a section or small section of a trail misses that mark, do we keep those trails completely out of the state multi-use trails definition? So with all of those input in mind, with our internal discussions we had at a team between departments, with DCR and VDOT, we kind of went through and did some wordsmithing to the trails definition. And next slide, please. So what we came up with was this kind of a definition that encompasses a wider variety of trails, but also does not cut out any trails that don't meet these criteria for all of its length. So in terms of multimodal, of course, it is going to serve people who walk, bike, roll, equestrian uses. In terms of safety, we use the term that it needs to be preferably separated from motor vehicle traffic, because we are trying to build a multi-use trail that is what is the ideal standard for the multi-use trails. Adding the word preferably means that for some sections, it might be that this trail might have a protected bike lane for some parts of it, but only very small sections of it. We as far as possible, we want folks to have this continuous network of just non-motorized transportation. So minimizing that, but allowing longer trails, especially to have smaller sections to be safe but protected on-road facilities. Accessible, again, we have used the word preferably have a hard surface and strive for a grade of less than 5%, which means that for most cases, again, we are looking to have something that's accessible to most of the people in the Commonwealth, but also recognizing that some of the natural topographies or barriers or right-of-way restrictions might not allow us to always get this. But again, our intention is to make it as accessible as possible. The last criteria that we had identified was regionally significant, but then we changed it to be regionally connected instead of regionally significant, because this means that it's not just longer trails that are going to be the spine that connects the whole Commonwealth, but we are also recognizing that there could be major gaps within existing trail networks that filling those gaps might actually connect the region. So recognizing both the importance of longer and shorter trails, but having that trail network view of the system, not looking at trails as individual pieces, but as a part of the bigger system of trails is what we are trying to achieve with this definition. So linking places as well as other trail facilities and any other destinations that people are more likely to go to visit for work or for recreation. And one of the things you'll see is we have tried to stay away from just saying that it's a recreational trail versus it's a very transportation oriented trail, because trails are important infrastructure and they should serve multiple purposes, which they do. It depends on the user, how the user wants to use the trail, as long as we build it to serve multiple purposes for the non-motorized modes. Next slide. Now I'm going to just go into the upcoming public engagement forums that we have arranged, and that starts right next week. So Monday is the first forum that we are going to have. Then we are giving off for Halloween for trick and treating, and then we come back on Wednesday, and then again on Thursday. These are all in the evening, 90 minutes. For Nova, the time is a little bit different. It's 6:30 to 8, but for not just for Nova, sorry, for the northern region, it is 6:30 to 8, allowing for traffic. We know that, but for the eastern and the western regions, we are going to start at 6 and end at 7:30. Now, the public doesn't have to stay for the whole time. They can come in. There will be a pre-recorded presentation, and all of these three, the Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday presentations, they're all going to present the same materials. I'll be present. We'll have representatives from each of the districts in there. So if you have any question regarding the State Trails Plan, the process, or any comments that you want to share with us, please feel free to join the session. You don't have to stay for the whole 90 minutes. Come in, share what you have to, and then you can leave. And we're all going to be there fielding questions. If we cannot answer all your questions, we'll have a FAQ and on our website that hopefully will get to those questions. Next slide. And these are the QR codes. Again, if you are in the northern region or the eastern or western and that time and date does not work for you, please feel free to sign up for any of the other sessions that are there. Come in, listen to us, ask questions. It will be a good opportunity for you to send in your questions to the State Trails office. And Taylor, if you can share, I'm hoping that you're going to share the slides with everybody, so you all will have the link and the QR code to use. Next. Okay, the last part of our public engagement process is the focus group. And again, these groups are going to be very small, about 8 or 9 folks in each focus groups. And we are looking to get a diverse array of folks in each of the 5 focus groups we are going to have, and that's the QR code to submit your interest to be part of one of the focus groups. Again, we are getting a lot of interest to be a part of it. The consultants are going to randomly select and contact you all if you are part of it, and then you'll have to go through a questionnaire screener, and then you can, after the questionnaire is done, you can then come back and fill up. There's an activity that you need to do, and then be a part of a 2-hour focus group, which is a very in-depth discussion of what your personal experiences are, what you like, what you dislike about trails, and then share your experiences with all of us. And again, remember, this is a very small focus group. It's about 8 people. So we will try to get to as many people to build up our base from which to select from. And we want to have diversity in terms of age, in terms of race, in terms of income, but also geographic diversity across the state. So make sure if you're interested, put in your email address, your contact, and your geography, so roughly your zip code, so that we know where you all are coming from. And that said, this is our kind of a 3-pronged approach. One is the survey, which is very overall 5-minute survey overview of what people think in general. Then we have a much more intimate town hall gathering next week. 3 gatherings. Again, feel free to attend any of them. And then this one is a lot more personalized one-on-one discussion with a few people who are going to help us by sharing their experiences of multi-use trails. So that is it. And I have my contact information, the State Trails Office, in the next slide. If you have any questions, please send in emails to the State Trails Office at vdot.virginia.gov, and this is just me, so I'll try to be as prompt as possible, but be patient in if you have any questions or have any suggestions for the State Trails Office. Thank you so much.
Taylor, do we have time for a question?
Yes, I did see one hand raised. We can go ahead and answer.
Matthew, do you still have a question?
Hey, yeah, good morning. So I'm Matt Helt. I'm the George Washington Jefferson National Forest Trails and Wilderness Program Manager. Just my question is, those 3 districts, are those standard VDOT districts, or how were the northern, eastern, I can't remember the third name, how were those determined?
So yes, so they are a combination of VDOT districts. So if you go back to the slide, Taylor, real quick, you'll see that the Eastern District is only 2. Eastern section is only 2 districts, whereas you'll see the Northern is 3, and then the West, I'm very sorry. The Western District is Bristol, Stanton, Salem, and Lynchburg. Eastern is Richmond and Hampton Roads, and then you have the Northern region as the Nova, Culpeper, and Fredericksburg. So it's not equally distributed, but this is this is taken from a similar distribution that the vulnerable road user studies was done, and they had broken up the state into these 3 rough regions. But again, as I said, if these dates don't work for you, you can join any of the other dates and still ask us questions.
Yeah, no, my comment is I would just be very hesitant to use these as standard regions. As someone who grew up and lives in Albemarle County, I think you're going to receive a lot of pushback from pretty much everyone by including Albemarle County in the northern region. And I can imagine folks who live in Southwest Virginia, we might think it's the 81 corridor, but there's a lot of differences in these regions. And if you're trying to get broader feedback, I would encourage maybe a slightly different layout.
Yeah, we realize there is no perfect way to divide that will solve everybody's. But then again, these presentations are not district specific. They are to inform the statewide trails plan, we just, because we are doing 3, we just divided into these regions, but please spread the word, sign up, and again, feel free to join any of the presentations. You don't have to stay for the whole 90 minutes. If you just want to send us your questions, that is also fine. It's just an additional opportunity for any of the residents or any of you to just be a part of the outreach and engagement process.
Taylor, we have one more question.
Yep, go right ahead.
Hi, I don't know if that's me, but I'm Ellen Shepard, Virginia's United Land Trust. Thank you for the overview of that. That was appreciated. I just had a question about the General Assembly passed a budget in September, and if there is a, oh no, it looks like you're coughing. Are you okay? If there's a timeline for that, the rollout of that budget allocation for the different trails that were specified in the budget, what that timeline might be? Thank you.
We have, that was our question too, at least my question. We don't have a specific timeline. We are currently looking at some of the preliminary engineering studies and the cost estimates for each of the 5 trails. And as soon as the validation is done, we will try to forward the recommendations, and hopefully the decisions can be made sooner rather than later, but no specific time frame has been shared.
The only other thing I see in the chat box is, Torsia, if you could share the questionnaire link, that would be appreciated in the chat.
The questionnaire link or the forum link, or both?
The request in the chat just says, please share the questionnaire link in the chat.
Okay.
Peter, I don't know if you want to clarify what link you're requesting, or maybe that's been addressed in the presentation, which we will share this with folks. So any of the links that are in the presentation are there.
Right. So yeah, just it was a pretty long link sitting in a PowerPoint. It's not like we could pull that. We'd have to like quickly jot it down on a piece of paper, and it would be easy enough to put it in the chat, and then we could copy and paste it out. Talking about the interest in the focus group link.
I'm going to put in all of the link for the focus group participation, as well as the town hall, the virtual town halls, in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Torsia.
Thank you, Torsia. We appreciate it. We will
Thank you.
proceed.
Much time.
Thanks. So next, we're going to segue into our STAC survey overview. And as you all recall, and as Torsia touched on a little bit, we administered a survey to STAC members to advise the State Trails Office trails definitions for the State Trails Plan. But the second part of that was to get feedback about the future of STAC, and that's on STAC structure, content, composition, everything like that. And so we sent it out to all of the STAC members that we have on our established list, and it was open from August 9th to September 8th. And members received varying follow-up emails based on when or if they completed the survey. And by the time it closed, we received 23 responses, which is less than half of STAC members. One of the first questions that we asked is, which of the following groups are you currently a member of? And we asked this question after realizing and acknowledging that there are multiple different bike-related, trail-related groups in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we wanted to see kind of what kind of overlap we had in our STAC membership and with those other groups. And so you can see on your screen, in addition to STAC, there's also the State Trails Plan Advisory Committee, which was assembled to guide the State Trails Plan. There is VDOT's Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, which meets quarterly, and it has more of an educational and advocacy focus. And there's also the Recreational Trails Advisory Committee, which guides the selection of projects for the Recreational Trails Program. And then we also had a category included for none, which told us, you know, those responses that maybe there are members who we have identified on our STAC membership list that might not necessarily think they're STAC members, or they didn't think that they fit in the membership buckets for any of these different groups. But as far as the results, survey respondents mostly were just members of STAC, but we had a couple members that were sprinkled in to the different committees across the board. The next question asked survey respondents to respond to a statement, and the statement was, the roles and responsibilities of STAC are clearly identified. We got 23 responses to this question, and no one felt strongly on either end of the spectrum, but what really stands out about these responses is that more than half of people did not outright agree that the roles and responsibilities of STAC are clearly identified. A lot of folks were in the middle, didn't agree or disagree. But I do think it's really interesting that over half of the respondents didn't agree that the roles and responsibilities are clear. I wanted to kind of take a minute to pause to see if we had any initial reactions to this or any initial thoughts on these responses. Yes, Sally, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I would just say I may have answered that question as neither agree or disagree, because I think as we are evolving with the State Trails Office and that new advisory committee, the lines are a little blurry. And I think I, for one, kind of need clarification between the two different groups.
Thank you. That's a good context. Anyone else want to speak up to these results? Or maybe if you didn't fill out the survey, if you have any reactions to this? Kat, I see your hand up.
I would just echo what Sally mentioned. You know, we've got BPAC, we've got STAC, we've got VTA. There are a lot of different groups, which is awesome. But I want to make sure each group understands what their role is and how we're working together. I didn't even mention the Office of Trails. And we also have a lot of great new faces at the table as well. So I think even just a clear statement of this is what STAC does, and then maybe even, gosh, a retreat of all of us all coming together, since we're all for the common good of trails, could be an interesting thing for us. But I do think some clarification would be really helpful for the future for all groups and for all trails.
Thank you. And so we thought this would be a really good opportunity to pull some of the language from the code that identifies what STAC is and what STAC is supposed to do. And so for this screen, I will read off this little excerpt, and then we have another slide that covers specific bullets. And so the State Trails Advisory Committee is established as an advisory committee of DCR to assist the Commonwealth in developing and implementing a statewide system of attractive, sustainable, connected, and enduring trails. And so that is what we have specifically outlined in the code. And then it goes on to say, the committee shall examine and provide recommendations regarding all of the various bullets that you see on your screen. And I won't take the time to read every single one of those, but these are some of the things that STAC was created to hopefully address, research, and propose some approaches. If anyone has the opportunity to kind of read through some of these, does anyone have any feedback for what STAC might already be doing or things that we could do better from any of these items on the list? Yes, Kat.
I don't mean to take the floor again, just questions. So these recommendations will then go into a report that goes to the General Assembly. And
yes.
that is the role of STAC, is to, our role is to, these are the things we can recommend, and then the report goes out to the General Assembly. That is what we do.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure everyone understands that, because I think that's really important to understand. Cool. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thanks for asking. And out of all of these items that are up on the screen right now, since it's taken directly from Virginia State Code, STAC at its discretion can kind of decide what, as a group, you all want to focus on out of this list. You know what I mean? So if there's something that specifically pops out or any of these things, you all at your discretion are able to pull these and make progress on those. We also asked what STAC members thought their role was in coordinating with the State Trails Office. And we received 19 responses to this question. Overwhelmingly, the theme of these responses were related to ongoing collaboration, which Torsia already touched on a little bit. Respondents indicated that STAC could bring its own trail-related priorities to the State Trails Office, coordinate with stakeholders and collaborate with those stakeholders as well. A second theme was decision-making. So comments falling under this theme included notes about the State Trails Plan, helping to set state trail priorities and guiding funding resources. And the last theme was really representing the full spectrum of trail users and trail types. And the specific comments that we got related to this one is that if the State Trails Plan is going to focus primarily on those larger regionally significant trails, maybe STAC could focus on those other smaller trails that fill the gaps and further connect communities. And so that idea of making sure that STAC represents the full spectrum of the trail users came up in the survey many times, and that was obviously really significant for folks. We also asked what content STAC members would like to see during future meetings, and we received 14 responses to this question. General themes were that respondents wanted to see more case studies about trails that highlighted things like best practices, hearing about funding programs and policies, and also for STAC to do some strategic planning, like Kat already mentioned earlier during this call. And so responses related to that spoke about prioritizing tasks for the STAC and identifying external opportunities, such as the initiative that led to the creation of the Virginia Trails Alliance. That was something that folks mentioned was a really significant outcome that they got out of STAC, and more strategic planning might help arrive at other things like that. Other feedback of note mentioned workshops, general updates from things like the Virginia Outdoors Plan, the State Trails Office, and the Recreational Trails Program. The next question asks what structural changes respondents would like to see for STAC, and we received 11 responses for this question. The major themes that we pulled out were subcommittees, more authority, and formalized membership criteria. As far as subcommittees, comments related to this theme specifically spoke about how there are different types of trail users and how maybe subcommittees or working groups around the specific trail user could be helpful. Like maybe there would be something like an equestrian subcommittee, maybe there would be one for mountain biking, maybe there would be one for hiking, things like that. More authority talked about the ability to vote on things, so STAC as a body wanting to vote on individual things as a group, and providing recommendations to the State Trails Office. And formalized membership criteria was something that was brought up a couple times, and we received a few kind of opposing responses to that sort of theme. Some members specifically talked about wanting more technical membership and having that sort of criteria, while others said that they wanted more trail advocates and trail users that were eligible to be a part of STAC. Does anyone want to chime in a little bit more on that question or brainstorm on the call here today about the future of STAC and structural changes?
Hey, this is Andrew Downs at the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Just a thought, I think a lot of this is good information to have, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate in the survey. I would like to hear, I guess, kind of the other side of the coin, and from, either the legislature or state employees, what services STAC could provide, what value the state agencies see in STAC, and how maybe we could better serve to fulfill our role, that was just described in the legislation. So while I think this is good at getting the opinions of STAC, the folks that we partner with too, I want to make sure that we hear them and make sure that we are as effective as possible in supporting their work as well.
Thank you. That's a good question. Kelly, did you want to speak on that a little bit?
Sure, thanks for the question. So STAC is not a regulatory committee, meaning we can't we can't impact regulations, but it's certainly a recommendation committee. And each year, in fact, I think this year our report has now been submitted. I can verify that and validate that, but we did provide a report every October 1st to the General Assembly, and it includes the recommendations from the 2 meetings the prior year. So the report that was provided October 1 of this year would have included last October and the April meeting that we had at the vault meeting. Any recommendations that come during those meetings or from potential subcommittees can be used inside that report. We can't validate changes, meaning that ensure we want this and that is now regulation. That is not what STAC is, at least it's not what it is by the code. But we certainly can impact it with the recommendations that we were given. So my personal opinion, subcommittees are great ways to do that, where we break out portions of STAC and maybe they provide recommendations toward the larger meetings that we have in October and in April, and then that could be discussed at those meetings. Some of the concerns that we have is, certainly number of staff and being able to facilitate every meeting, but I don't think that would be necessary for a subcommittee, as long as we bring it to the larger committee of the STAC meetings in October and in April when we've established them so far. So I don't know if I answered all of that, but hopefully I answered some of those questions.
Kelly, one of the questions in the chat was, could the last report be sent to STAC members? Is that something
We can
address?
provide, I believe there's, we will provide a link to where to find that report. I don't want to go outside to say it's been posted to a town hall, because I'm not sure exactly where we're posting the final report. I think it's in the legislative committee, but we can provide that link to where the public access is to anybody that you'd like to see it. But yes, we absolutely can. I don't want to put you on the spot, Frank, but do you know if that report has been now posted for the public access?
I don't know if it's been posted on Town Hall yet, but I know it has been submitted for review.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good questions. Before we segue into the next portion of the agenda, this was one of the last questions. And so I want to kind of give anyone an opportunity, if you have any last sorts of comments or feedback about the survey. We got some really good feedback from it, but we could always, use more if anybody has comments here today. All right, so we will transition into the next portion of the presentation, where we are going to talk through the draft standard operating procedures. The survey gave us some really good feedback, and we used that feedback to draft a document that would guide the State Trails program area, which would include STAC. And so I'm going to pass it over to Chief Planner Samantha Wangsgaard, who's going to talk through some of this. Samantha, would you like me to stop sharing my screen so you can share?
I should be able to share mine. It gives me the permission, so just give me a moment and I'll make sure I pull up the right one and I'll let you know. All right. It shows that I have a document up on the screen. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, great. So as a result of a lot of the conversations that we've been having regarding the survey and speaking in particular can engage with STAC, we are developing a State Trails program area standard operating procedure. And as part of that, again, taking the feedback from the survey, other lessons learned, our ongoing work with the VDOT's Trails Office and Torsha, trying to put together some policy procedure and roles to help guide the future of STAC. The document I have up on the screen, we will share after the meeting today, and we want to get your feedback on the specifics. It's a 3-page document, and it will be included after the meeting. So don't feel like you have to look at everything right now and give instant feedback. This is just meant as a overview of some of the key parts of what we've started to draft, and looking for your feedback with regards to that. So starting off, looking at the committee size and composition, some of the feedback we got was regarding the size and the number of folks that we have on STAC. The legislation does not have a cap on the number of folks that we have. But again, there was feedback that we received, as well as some other feedback regarding committees and different items like that. So we are proposing to be looking at 25 voting members. And that does not mean that that there would be less people per se, but allowing for 25 specifics, looking at the organizations and how they might interact with that. So if there's something that came up that required a vote, we'd have a mechanism for how that voting would work, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But just looking at that committee size and composition, appointment to STAC, this was something that we've been tasked to look at for a little over a year at this point in time, and just trying to identify appointments. So again, the code directly addresses several organizations that are highlighted on the screen, as well as several TAC committee members, and then the rest is very broadly other individuals with technical expertise. So we are looking at the procedures for appointments to STAC regarding those individuals and how that would occur, so it's clear to folks how you would be appointed to STAC and that procedure. The next section that we looked at, again, taking feedback from folks in terms of, you know, the composition of the group, and bringing in folks that may have not previously participated, but also recognizing that there's constraints to the size of a group if we continue to add, and how a group that size might function. So we've talked about looking at term limits, or, you know, terms period for individuals, to accommodate and encourage that diversity of opinions and feedback, and some of the information we received from the survey and STAC members. It also talks about term limits and making sure that we have active participation, and those folks that are on STAC are given the opportunity to participate, and if there are others out there that want to participate that might not be able to, being able to work with those capacities with regards to the term limits. And then voting, again, particularly with our engagement now with the State Trails Office and potential opportunities there for weighing in on different State Trails Office matters, looking at how voting on particular issues related to the State Trails Office or other items that may come up, and covering that kind of area. And then the meeting logistics are fairly similar to what you all have likely seen in the past. We'd like to, since capitalizing on the success of the virtual meetings that we started to do more of with the pandemic, looking at meeting twice a year one being the meeting that we're having today virtually in October for 1 hour business meeting. And then continuing that relationship we have with Vault at the Virginia Land Conservation and Greenways Conference to allow for a little bit more time for not just STAC business, but also some of those educational programming opportunities and continuing that partnership that allows us to also engage with individuals that are attending Vault. So those are some of those items, and then also talking about how what the procedures for potentially removal from STAC and engagement outside of regular meetings in terms of, so one of the items that came up is how if something from the State Trails Office comes up and we need your feedback on it, the best way to engage outside of the 2 regular meetings that we would have either at Vault or the fall meeting like we're having now. So again, this is what we're working on right now. It is a draft, and I just wanted to make sure we walk through some of these key points today. And if there was any initial feedback on this, like I said, it will be sent out for y'all's review. And we can certainly have some more in-depth conversations once you all have an opportunity to kind of read through it more than me just scrolling through it as part of this presentation. But with that, Taylor, do I have a few minutes for questions if anyone has questions or?
Yes, we do have time.
Okay. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, we can take those now, either in the chat box or if you raise your hand. Otherwise, like I said, we will send this out afterwards for comment.
Yes, Kat.
I'm sorry I keep asking questions. And so the composition is meeting twice a year. Is that mandated by the legislation?
Yes, the legislation mandates a minimum of twice a year.
So, and I'm calling these bylaw, the procedures are twice a year. I think it could be nice to do a third meeting before the October 1st deadline of the report so that STAC members can talk through some of the ideas or read through the draft. Doesn't need to be, I guess, in the policies and procedures since you already have minimum of 2 times. But I think this is great work. I think trails in general in Virginia are going through some growing pains right now, and these policies and procedures are going to be really important for STAC. I'm interested to hear what other people think about this, but overall, great work.
I have a thumbs up from Ernest.
Yeah, I would just agree with Kat on that, the recommendation to have a meeting to kind of discuss the draft report. I think that's a pretty common approach that many of these types of reporting to the General Assembly requirements go, that the stakeholders are involved in looking at what's going to them before it comes over.
Appreciate that feedback. I've got Ernest has got his hand raised, and Sally I've got, so I'll start with Ernest.
I think Sally was first. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. It doesn't order it for me, so Sally, go ahead.
That's fine. I mean, mine is a self-interest question. I think if you scroll down, I saw a term limit of 2 4-year terms. And for some of us who probably were on the original STAC, that may mean that I don't know what year I'm in at this point because I can't remember what year we started, but it may mean that there's a high turnover.
We would be,
those who were original members have to leave.
We would not be, I mean, this would not like be right away. We would start the clock from the time that the SOP would be adopted. So it's not, okay. It's not like right now. We don't have the mechanism, and nor would we want to encourage that. So it would be based on when the SOP is adopted.
Okay. And can you remind me which year we started? Just out of curiosity now.
We've got members on the membership list dating back to 2015. So,
Okay, that's what I
but
thought.
I wasn't here in 2015. So if there's folks that were from that original group, Kat, you might have been one of them. Those are
So
some of the
the
dates I've got.
legislation creating the committee passed in 2015. So it would have been created after July 1st
Yeah.
of that year. And it was Chesapeake Bay Commission legislation. So that's how I can track it back that way, even though I wasn't with the commission at that point in time.
Oh, great. Thank you for the clarification.
That's about as far as I could trace my emails back. So that sounds about right.
Great.
And that kind of leads into my question. Would it be possible to get a notification or letter or something to let us know that we're officially on here and what our term is, which is the first part of my question. And then the second part of my question is I will probably drop as next year, but I will probably be asked to represent the organization because I'm not going anywhere. I'm just trying to get new leadership to take over. So that term limit of, when your appointment is over, then you're done with your whatever we're calling the local organization. Just had an interest in, can that be a representative for the organization, or does it have to be an officer of that organization?
All right. I just saw a chat box pop up. Frank or Kelly, is that one that you guys could talk to a little bit? Just so it's.
So we're required, and it was on the list, I think that, I can't remember if it was a slide or one of Samantha's slides, but there's a requirement for a certain number of organizations to be represented on STAC, meaning a legislative requirement, and then there's other. So certainly with the potential of 25 people, we are talking about more than just the required minimum of, I believe it's 8 members outside of DCR, 8 members that are required to be. I would anticipate, but again, we can discuss this, is a representative of one organization. It does not necessarily have to be the leader, as long as the organization's representative. More people, STAC meetings are public. So certainly 10 people from the organization could attend a STAC meeting. What we're referring to here is the voting members. So what we would request is, or at least what we're potentially suggesting to request, is one voting member of that organization, to include even state organizations. So we're required to have Department of Wildlife Resources and VDOT, of course, on the STAC committee. We would ask that only one of them be the voting member, and they can bring 5 people to the meeting, but only one of them be actually acknowledged as the STAC member. Frank, do you want to add to that, or do you think I said that in a wrong way?
No, Kelly, I think you're correct. I think that what we're suggesting would imply that an organization that has a seat on STAC, that organization should recommend to STAC who their voting representative is going to be. I don't really feel like DCR or the STAC needs to get into a situation where we require it to be the president or an officer within that organization, but that organization can make the decision as to who represents their interests best.
We envision helping VDOT, especially in light of the Office of Trails and the funding that I know you are all well aware of that was assigned to VDOT, is to somehow help guide them into the recommendations, because we are only making those recommendations. But as they have requests of this body, we can reach out to those voting members to make a recommendation, and then we can then turn around and give that information to VDOT, should it be through STAC, and say, hey, we have 25 members on STAC and 25 members voted this way, or whatever the breakout of the vote is. And we would hope that that representation of that group is being discussed within that group, and that is the voting person that's being asked. That way we don't have one group overrepresented. That's really our goal here, is to just make sure we have a diverse group of people that are making those recommendations.
Kat, I see your hand up.
At the very beginning of your document, you have something about demographics. Can you talk about what that means? I know specifically our group has been not very diverse, and so I'm curious if that will help, should reflect the demographics of the Commonwealth as captured in the census. So can you tell me more about that?
That was a recommendation that was provided to us. And I think internally, that's an area that we would be very happy to get, not to turn it right back around at you, Kat, but that is one of the bullet points that would be something that we would love to get y'all's feedback on. Does that bullet point make sense, or how would we be able to capture something like that? Or is there a better way to try and capture a diverse group of whether it's organizations, individuals, demographics, content area, etc. But that is that's a good question, and one that we've asked as well internally, and it's something that we would appreciate your feedback on as well, because it was a pretty broad recommendation, and there's a lot of different ways to slice that orange. So
yeah, no, I totally hear you. I guess it's a question that most organizations, right, are processing and figuring out ways. One recommendation could be one of the committees is DEIJ, are just processing that question and ensuring that STAC is represented in a diverse way. Because I would say bluntly, I don't think we are right now, and I think that we can do better.
Appreciate that feedback.
Samantha, there was also a question in the chat from Jim Lynch that says, is a quorum a majority of individual members or a majority of organizations?
I think that may have been slightly answered or covered in Kelly and Frank's discussion about the voting members. A quorum would be based on the voting members, so that would be based on going back to that particular. So it wouldn't be if you had 7 people attending from X organization, it wouldn't be counting those 7 people towards the quorum. It would be the organizational, or the if you are on STAC as an individual, it would be based on that voting structure. Well, again, I don't see any more questions in the chat box or hands that are up, and I will make sure that this is included when Taylor follows up with the information for the meeting. But we appreciate your feedback on this particular end of things, and I'll turn it back over to Taylor. I'm going to stop sharing for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. All right, so my last slide that I have up here just has the details about our next meeting, which is going to be in person at the 2024 Vault meeting, just like last year. And so we wanted to take an opportunity just to solicit some topics that you all might want to hear about. What we got from the survey of things, what people would want to see at future STAC meetings, just to run through this one more time. case studies, funding programs and policies, strategic planning, best practices, workshops, general updates. Does anybody want to chime in? Do any of those kind of speak to you all more than others? Or does anyone have any ideas about content that you definitely want to hear about at the next meeting?
Is it possible to put the slide up of our legislated purpose?
Yeah. Were you referring to the first one that kind of defines stack, or this one
That
with all
one,
of the?
that
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So one thing I appreciate getting all the presentations and updates in Stack, but sometimes it can be really heavy towards providing the Stack members updates. And I think we should be really focused at times on what recommendations we can provide, and have that sort of information exchange go the other way as well. So I like getting all the updates about what's going on around the Commonwealth. But if we could structure our time to achieve these, 9 or 10 goals in support of DCR, then I think that would be great too.
Thanks, Andrew. That's a great suggestion.
Andrew, I know that was something that came up in some of the survey responses. Do you or anyone else on Stack have any specific recommendations on how something like that might be accomplished? I know I heard several people in the questions today, as well as in the survey responses, talking about committees or subgroups within Stack. Is that part of what you're talking about, is potentially having, subgroups within Stack that maybe one of the Stack members is the lead on that and works within those subgroups to bring specific things? Is that what you're potentially leading us towards, or getting at with regards to some of that, or just mechanisms for being able to have that information from Stack come the other way versus just being presented to, like you mentioned?
Great question. That's a big question. I think one of the things that would help me, and I'll just speak for myself now, is to understand where the gaps are, where where DCR or other agencies need support to do the things on this list. I mean, some of these things I think we do pretty well on, are already underway, are maybe not as high priority as others. And then there are probably places where not only is there a high priority identified by DCR, but there's also a gap. And so understanding those places and really framing the question, I like subcommittees. I do feel like the natural tendency these days is to committee and report and meet a lot. And, if we can be really purposeful, and maybe it's not just like all the gaps or all the priorities, maybe we just focus on one where we know we need either, whether it's supporting or planning with the State Office of Trails or whatever it is, just simplifying it and focusing on one or two questions at that time that are both a high priority and places where we could help might be effective. But I can't really come up with the questions that would be asked and then we would provide support on, because I don't have a full picture of the priorities or where the gaps in work or knowledge base or experience or whatever might exist.
Thank you. Frank, I see, McGuire, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to build a little bit on what Andrew was saying, and I do think that at the Vault conference, there's an opportunity with as many of us in the room to do a facilitated discussion around some of these things. We have a great brain trust when we get that number of people together. So I would love to see something that's a bit more interactive and trying to pull out how we can actually affect some of these strategies. What are the skill sets we have within our groups before we just break down into committees to say, well, this is going to be shunted in this direction. So I definitely was one of the people that answered the strategic planning part in the survey. So.
Thank you. We appreciate your feedback. Anyone else have any comments or suggestions about the content?
I see Sally's got a question or a comment in the chat, Taylor. Potential for some roundtable discussions in some of these topics. I think we can definitely take that into consideration for the spring meeting.
Thank you, Sally. All right, well, that was our last slide of the day. Thank you so much, everyone, for dialing into this meeting. Anyone have any last words or last comments, or Kelly or Samantha, did you all want to chime in on anything else before we close out?
Yeah, I wanted to thank everyone again for attending. I know some of you, just like you mentioned, I was here in 2015 as well. And so for those that have been on the STAC committee that long, we really do appreciate all of your attendance and participations in the meeting so far. I know it's evolving, and with a lot of funding opportunities with trails that I think this group is always excited for. That gives us even more potential for reinvigoration of this meeting and of this committee. We certainly will take everybody's comments into play. I think the Vault meeting in the spring, we might be able to figure out how to incorporate or facilitate a portion of that meeting so that we encourage and engage with you guys instead of just bringing information to you and giving it as a almost delivering the information. It sounds as if from what I heard is that we need to actually listen and hear from you at these meetings and engage. So maybe we'll come up with a different way to facilitate that meeting in the spring. So look out for that. We would appreciate, I know one thing that I would love to see is to understand how to talk with all of you outside of these meetings. So we have 2 large meetings, and those meetings certainly take a lot of work to engage, but we would love to hear how you would like to talk to us outside of these meetings. So in other words, what I'm asking is if email is the right way to contact you so that we can get a response, or just ask just simple questions, maybe survey questions or a survey link. I think it would help us to understand how to engage with this group outside of the October and April meetings. It could be as simple as, here's my email address, I'm available anytime, or I rather get texts, or I rather get some other communication. We're trying to get better at communicating with large groups of people, but as you can imagine, being part of a large group, it does make it difficult because everybody communicates differently. Some people like to have a phone call. Some people like, email. Some people don't even open their email. So we noticed certainly with the survey, just the number of respondents is maybe we're not communicating just that information effectively. So tell us what you want us to hear so that we can better communicate with you. I think that would be one of my requests between now and the spring meeting, so that we know how to engage with you. And certainly if you're not sure you're on STAC or you think you are, send us those emails as well. We'll make sure we provide this whole presentation to everyone that attended today. And I think there's at least 28, it looks like, participants today. And I'll remind you of the QR codes and the information that VDOT added, because it sounds like there's many people on this group that will want to attend one of those VDOT meetings. I'll also reiterate what Torsia said, is you can attend, it doesn't matter where you live, you can attend any one of those meetings and sit through. So if you want to participate and help them to guide them with their process, that would be great as well. So with that said, I'm going to conclude, unless, Frank, do you want to add any final remarks? I do want to thank everyone for attending today.
I don't have anything to say other than thank you all for your time and your support of this effort, and look forward to what we can accomplish going forward, and look forward to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.